The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often, he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome back, folks. Today we're going to have another update from another one of our covered companies, this one being Seabridge Gold, which, as you see here, is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol SEA, here in the US under the symbol SA, on the New York Stock Exchange. And take a minute to jot down, or you might want to come back to it, their website and other information here too, which as always I encourage you to keep up with. Seabridge has been a company known to me almost since the day it started back in 1999, when co-founder Rudi Fronk, who you're going to see in just a minute here, and his partner Jim Anthony started the company propitiously at a time when the secular bear market for gold was ending back about that time. Some of you remember that in 1999 and then again later in 2001 you had a double bottom in the gold price at about $250 to $260 an ounce US. And since then, it's been not always in a straight line, but it's been all uphill since that time. And over that amount of time, Seabridge has fulfilled its desire and dream to build the best gold company out there by a couple of different metrics. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But first of all, as you also see on the screen here, as usual, keep in mind that either Rudi or myself might be making what are construed as forward-looking statements. So be aware of that. But moving on, one of the things I've always pointed out about Seabridge is that at a time, and even now, after a big move for gold in 2024 to new records, copper hit a record earlier this year, pulled back, now it's kind of treading water, but still well above $4 a pound. These are the times that you need to be looking at solid long-term stories if you believe in the continued prospects for gold and copper, either one of them or both of them. This is the time you want to be building your portfolio with good solid stories that have got some upside. And as you're going to be hearing anew, Seabridge needs to be at the top of your list of companies that you put in your portfolio and keep there. And as I'll say later on, if I remember to, with Rudi, let nature take its course. And the reason for that is really legion. There's a number of reasons for it. First of all, and I'm going to put this up on the screen here and go through this real quick where Seabridge is concerned. You have in one company several different projects that for anybody of a smaller size, even a medium size exploration company, any one of these five literally could be the core asset or flagship asset for them. I'm going to run through them here real quick while the slide is up here, and we'll get some updates and be brought up to date as need be by Rudi when he comes on. But in the lower left, you see the KSM Project in British Columbia. We'll probably spend most of our time on that. But as you see here, it's the world's largest undeveloped gold and copper project. It's got more gold resources, literally, than any development stage project on planet Earth. I think if you add the total up, it's something like 150 or some odd million. I'll let Rudi correct me on that number later on. As far as the core asset at KSM is concerned, you've got, as you see here, under Proven and Probable Reserves, which is the highest confidence level, 47 plus million ounces of gold, 7 plus billion pounds of copper, 160 million ounces of silver. And as I'll have him recap for us, it in an economic setting, with all the work that's been done adding the copper assets, that a lot of people, I think, still to this day don't appreciate just how solid and robust the economics are here with this thing. Just up to the northwest is the Iskut project. There's been some news out on that recently you're going to hear about. This is something that Seabridge for a while now has thought that could be a copycat in a way of KSM, that this could be a very large, deep porphyry with massive deposit potentially, just like KSM. They moved the needle a little bit toward that direction recently. You'll hear about that. Moving over to the right now, top down, Courageous Lake is an asset that they have had for a while. They recently upgraded the resource there. There's a lot of promise there. It may or may not stay as part of the portfolio. They've various times looked at spending more money on developing it, and then at times, if they get a good deal, maybe to vend it out or joint venture it or something like that. We'll see what the story is with that. Three Aces is one of the more recent acquisitions. The company got, in my opinion, at least dirt cheap from a company that was in some distress. There's been some good news out of that one recently as well. That's in the Yukon territory. And last but not least, the one U.S.-based project that the company has is Snowstorm in Nevada. It's more greenfield. It's not up at the top of the priority list, at least these days, but there's a really cool backstory to that we're going to go through as well and remind people of. One more quick thing before I bring Rudi on. Be sure, if you are not already on my own email list or follow me on social media, that you do both. Here's our information at the National Investor from time to time when there are notable updates for Seabridge and other companies that we own, a lot of which you'll see also on my YouTube channel here. We'll put that information out. And in the near term now, with just as we're recording this conversation, the U.S. election results under our belt, well, 98% of them anyway. We haven't heard the House yet as far as a final verdict, but seems to be trending also in Republican direction. In the weeks ahead, the latter part of this year, and as we get into early 2025, I'm going to be redoing a lot of my usual sector-specific newsletters, highlighting some companies as well and talking about what the landscape is for various commodities, various stories and stuff like that with the new government and its policies that we're going to have come 2025. So again, if you're not already with me at the National Investor, make sure you sign up. And here with me is my old friend Rudi Fronk, the co-founder and CEO of Seabridge Gold. Rudi, good to see you.
Chris, always good to chat with you.
Before we get into this update, I want to congratulate you on two things I didn't mention at the beginning. One is, and we're recording this 2 days after the election day, so we're on Thursday, the 7th of November. Yesterday, on a day that gold was down 80 some dollars an ounce, copper was down several percent. We don't have to right now at least talk about the reasons for that. Seabridge shares were actually up a few pennies on a day. And you've held, unlike a lot of the gold space, you've done a bit better than a lot of the gold stocks out there, which by and large, and we'll close with this later and talk about our expectations in 2025. But gold stocks generally haven't kept up with gold. But a lot of people are in the recent past. Seabridge is in stronger and stronger hands as time has gone on, and I think that evidenced that. So congratulations on the share price doing good on a crummy day for the metals. More important, and in a broader story, it's 25 years since you and Jim Anthony got together and put Seabridge together. You've been celebrating your 25th anniversary during 2024 with a bunch of different things on social media and news and stuff. So especially congratulations for that, Rudi.
Well, Chris, thank you. It's hard to believe that it has been 25 years. If someone had told me 25 years ago that I'd still be the CEO of a public gold company, specifically Seabridge, I would have laughed at them. But here I sit 25 years later and still loving what I do.
Well, that's cool. And you're good at it, obviously. I alluded to this at the beginning. But, as we get into an update of what's going on with your flagship project, KSM, here's how good you've been at this. And I alluded to this very briefly before you came on, but you cannot find stocks, or folks rather, a gold stock or now a gold and copper stock that has got the kind of juice behind each public share of the company as Seabridge does, and whether it's the gold per share, you've seen that chart. I'll throw the copper chart up here right now. Nobody Nobody has got this, and especially over 25 years. And Rudi, not to disparage anybody else in the industry in different circumstances, but there's nobody over 25 years either who would still have the low share count that you do. And the track record of every time you raise money, it's accretive. It's not dilutive when you look at the underlying assets of the company. And that, I say, I'll add that's the third thing you need to be congratulated for. So how did you and Jim pull that off?
Well, great question. I look back and say, how the heck did we get to this point today? But that was one of our guiding principles from day one. The gold industry is hell bent on turning gold into cash, and quite honestly, not doing a great job at that. From day one, our goal was to turn cash into gold by building a company and growing a company that continued to grow its ounces of gold in the ground per share. The thought being that the more gold we can provide on a per share basis in a rising gold price environment, the better our share price should do relative to gold and other gold equities. And obviously, you look at our track record over the past 25 years in terms of share price performance relative to the gold price or other gold equities, and we've delivered on that.
Well, and that's to your credit. And as I said at the open before you came on, Seabridge for a long time was always one of my favorite trading vehicles if there were big swings in gold because you guys would move up a lot if the gold price moved up. Sometimes you correct more, but then go up again later. But for a long time now, because of the much broader story that KSM has become and all your other assets, I have long since taken the attitude that Seabridge is not a stock you should necessarily be trading. Is it possible? Of course it is, like with everything. But this is, if you're a believer in a long-term trajectory of gold and copper, as you and I both are, and Jim is, and a lot of other people, this is something that you want as a core of your portfolio and you sit on it and just wait for nature to take its course, so to speak. So, updating things, Rudi, on KSM. You importantly got that substantially started designation from the BC government a while back. So that buys time to continue what development activities remain. You just got, and you need to explain this again to me anew, if you don't mind, the whole tunnel thing. I know there was some dispute about this a while back, but your tunnel access now to go underground in the future. That was just extended by the BC government. So bring us up to date on those couple of things and related things to where development-wise KSM is now.
Yeah, so over the past 10 or so years, we've talked about getting a joint venture partner in for KSM. It's very clear to us that the size of this project and the complexity of it is beyond our capabilities. We need a major mining company as a partner. And over the past 10 years, as we've had discussions with mining partners, it's been clear that there have been a number of risks out there that we needed to deal with before a transaction can happen. The most recent one was that although KSM has its environmental approvals and construction permits in hand, those permits and approvals were set to expire in July of 2026. You can imagine that any big company looking at investing $6 billion into a project doesn't want to make that kind of investment knowing that the rug can be pulled out from underneath them by the government. Fortunately, there's a mechanism in British Columbia known as substantially started that if we were able to achieve that designation, the permits we have are then good for the life of the project. So in 2021, we went out and said, okay, we're going to remove this risk ourselves. We're going to go out and raise the dollars to do the work to get that designation. We went out and secured $375 million US in non-dilutive financing with Sprout royalties and Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, and then used those dollars into the project by building roads, camps, bridges, tying into the power grid, fish compensation areas. And then in January of this year, we submitted our application after we spent over $400 million Canadian on these activities. We have the support of the Indigenous people and the local communities and BC Hydro with our application. And then just a few months ago, we got the designation. So this project is now good for the life of the project. And if you look at the resources and reserves we have at KSM, the life of this project could be well in excess of 100 years.
Well, that's remarkable. And, I have reminded people from time to time, and I'm sure you have to do this too, that the initial knee-jerk reaction that a few people, even some so-called analysts, still have to this day, where Seabridge is concerned is that, oh yeah, well they got a lot of gold there, but I don't know if it's economic and it's lower grade and blah blah blah. And you've taken multiple steps over multiple years to turn the economics of this, especially now that a significant part of the whole story is copper, into something that's one of the more attractive economic projects out there, at least as far as your starter. Remind us of that too, because you're going to start for, what is it, 30 years under the current economic study. The first 30 years or so is going to be open pits. You're not underground. You're not doing a block cave right away.
Correct. And the block cave was a risk in previous mine
Sure.
plans. So in 2020, we went out and acquired a fifth deposit from our next door neighbor, Pretium. And then we integrated that deposit into the mine plan with an updated pre-feas in 2022 that now shows an initial mine plan of 33 years, averaging over 1 million ounces of gold production a year, nearly 200 million pounds of copper, over 2 million ounces of silver, at an all-in cost of production including the upfront capital, the sustaining capital, the closure costs, the reclamation costs, and the operating costs net of copper and silver credits of about $600 an ounce at 350 copper. I mean, the economics are phenomenal.
Yeah.
I've heard historically on grade, yeah, maybe back 20 years ago, grade was an issue. It isn't an issue now. There
Oh,
are lots of mines out there with lower grades generating a lot of cash flow for big companies.
and size wise, I think, Rudy, this is, and it's not an overstatement to say this, as far as your proven and probable reserves, you've got more than I think anybody on the planet. Are there any exceptions I'm not thinking of?
No, in terms of proven and probable gold reserves at KSM, we have 47 million ounces of gold and over 7 billion pounds of copper. But if you look at the total resource, we
Right.
have 12 billion tons of economic resources that host 160 million ounces of gold in all resource categories and over 59 billion pounds of copper. There is nothing out there
No.
this big.
No, there's not. And so at some point, you've got all of the pieces in place, or pretty much all the pieces in place. So getting down to brass tacks, 6 billion is not a small number, you know. And there's a handful of people on this planet or companies on this planet that can raise that kind of dough or write a check for that. There is some percolation recently of some added M&A activity. What, in your estimation, remains, if anything? And I know you've been, talking to companies over time. What are there any sticking points still that some people have? Are there any events they're looking for? I mean, a substantially started thing just got fixed or taken care of for a while. What does somebody want to see?
Well, over the years, and look, we've talked about a joint venture, as I mentioned, for a long time, and there was always additional work we had to do to get our potential partner comfortable with the asset that they were willing to do the deal that we wanted to do. Well, we have all that work done now. Substantially started, in my view, was the last piece of the puzzle we needed to get done to ensure that we can now get a partner in to develop this mine. So, as a result of substantially started, we now have six major mining companies engaged with us at the table looking at this opportunity. Uh, Terms are still more important to me than timing, but I like where we are right now in terms of the market environment, the need by these big companies to focus on new opportunities, focusing in safe jurisdictions, and focusing on projects that have good economics, and focusing on projects that can or are permitted. So KSM checks all the boxes, in my view, that you need to check to get a deal done. And substantially started was just the last piece of it that is now behind us.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, before we move on to the other projects and get a little update on those, Rudy, do you see the interest overall in KSM having been augmented by copper being part of this? Are there any companies looking at this more from a copper standpoint than gold?
Yeah, we have both gold and copper companies engaged with us, Chris. You know, either partner would be fine for us. What we're looking for is someone, number one, that's willing to do the work necessary to get to a construction decision. Number two is then willing to fund a significant portion of this project going forward. And number three has the social wherewithal and the operational experience to build and operate a mine the scale of KSM. The partnerships that we have developed with our Indigenous partners and First Nations are critical to maintain.
Right.
So we need to bring a partner in that can step in seamlessly to these relationships we have built over the years.
Okay. So by and large, it's you can't call it turnkey. That would be an overstatement. But you don't have a whole lot left to do except find the right terms.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's
We're ready to transact. First one to the table with the deal that we can say yes to, we're going to move forward with.
okay. So we'll wait and keep our uh, fingers crossed and whatnot that that's sooner rather than later. You have to believe, and you and I will talk about our metals outlook, when we finish up this update and take a lap around the rest of the projects. But with metals prices still inexorably going up as far ahead as the eye can see, that things are only going to get better. And I think it's been true in your place situation too with KSM that, and everybody's had this as well, even though as time goes on, your upfront costs are rising because of inflation and materials and this and that and everything else. If copper and gold are rising faster, that's net
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah. Yeah, we've run sensitivities obviously on the project, looking at increases in capital and operating costs. But even if you take some big numbers out there in terms of increases, the increase in gold and copper prices from what we did our base case study at more than offset the increase in potential cost creep.
Right.
So, at today's metal prices, you're looking at an NPV well above $11 billion US.
Not a bad number. And not a little bit or a little bit rather to the west, you've got the Iskut project. And there's been some thought on the part of you and your team and your great geologist team, Bill Threlkeld and everybody, that you might be sitting on the potential of a second KSM-like project. You've been doing some work there, and back in June, you came out with some a resource estimate up. I think that was the first one or an upgrade. You'll have to remind me for Bronson Slope. That's kind of on the edge of that.
Yeah, so when we purchased Iskut back in 2016 by buying a small public company that was teetering on the edge, they had a small resource estimate at Bronson Slope of about 2.2 million ounces of gold and a half a billion pounds of copper. Uh, our focus at Iskut was to find the big mother lodes, the big porphyry intrusions. But in the context of looking for those intrusions, we also did some additional drilling at Bronson. And as a result of the drilling we did at Bronson, we were able to increase the existing resource we acquired from the 2.2 million ounces to 5.5 million ounces, as well as doubling the copper. Again, that just ties into our business strategy of offsetting equity dilution with ounces in the ground.
Neat. And so you've been continuing to drill at Iskut. You put out some news just not that many weeks ago on
Yeah,
that.
we have made a major discovery. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about that. If you look at the intersects now at the SNP North target, we had 300 to 500 meters of continuous mineralization from pretty close to surface of grades of gold and copper that are pretty similar to the reserve grades we have at KSM. And we have not yet found the source. So we will go back and double down next year with another program and continue our exploration activities there. When we bought this project, we thought it had a lot of similarities to KSM. We're now finally proving that those similarities and the potential is real.
Nothing wrong with that. And like I said again at the outset, all of your projects, certainly not the least, the most important of which is KSM, but all the rest of these could be an anchor for any other company. And you've got several, projects that would be the flagship for anybody else. So congratulations on that as well. I know that you've told me before, as you've told others, that you really are, you've got a pretty good level of confidence that you've got a look-alike, for lack of a better term, for KSM there. So you're going to hit it harder next year.
We're going to hit it again for sure.
Going to hit it again. Okay. Folks, moving on. Um, I want to talk about three aces because I was at a mining conference back in the spring in New York, and a couple people gasped that I was sitting with when we were looking at this chart up on the board of stuff that the U.S. government, through the Defense Production Act, is looking at financing. And another one of my recommended companies, Fireweed Metals, was on there, is one that the U.S. government was actually looking at putting some money in up in the Yukon. And as I explained to these people, the Yukon, anybody, the average American, even the average American investor, what they know about Yukon is when they see Yukon Cornelius at Christmas time, when they watch the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer cartoon. But the Yukon has very quickly and over a period of time and steadily been putting more and more infrastructure in there to unlock its minerals endowment of all different kinds. In the case of fireweed, it's zinc and tungsten and whatnot. But your Three Aces project up there has kind of been moving up in importance to people who are paying any amount of attention, I think.
Yeah, so this is an asset we acquired at the height of COVID. It was held by a junior exploration company called Predator Gold. At one point in time, Three Aces generated a market cap to Predator Gold of a couple of $100 million. Uh, COVID hit, they ran out of money, they needed to do something desperately, and we were able to step in and buy this project for about $3 million using our shares. Um, we see a lot of opportunity at Three Aces. We're going slow there. First couple of years was actually just getting comfortable and identifying the First Nations we need to deal with and introducing ourselves to them and starting to build a relationship. We then went in and applied for an exploration permit, which we received. We had our first drill program last year just to go in and start to test the geologic model we have. We had a follower program this year to further test the model and expand the model. And we should be announcing the results of some of the program this year, or later this year. It's a project that we will continue to advance. It's a project that we see a lot of upside in. It's a project that has a lot of high grade near surface. If you look at the historical drilling there, I think 35% of the historic drill holes actually intersected 5 grams or better gold
Wow.
at near surface gold.
Well, near
It's
surface is
different. It's different than KSM, but it's something that we're pretty excited about. But it will need more work.
right. So the drilling, and that was going to be my next question. The drilling for this year is concluded, and you'll have assays out even by Christmas time potentially.
Yeah, we expect to, and as well as what we learn this year and what might be the next program look like.
Cool. Good. And moving on, Courageous Lake, you told me a while back that especially once you get that partner in at KSM, this might be the new number one focus for the company. Is that still the case?
Well, I think it's going to give it a hard
Well,
chase.
after that news from Iskut, I suppose, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
probably changed things.
yeah, so Courageous Lake is an interesting asset. It's an asset that we acquired from Newmont and Total Energy in 2002. It's an asset that we bought it, had about 5 million ounces of resources. We did a pre-feas at Courageous Lake in 2012 at a time when the Canadian dollar was at par with the US dollar, which is not good for Canadian assets. And as expected, the asset at that point in time showed pretty marginal economics. And at that time, we were well on our way at KSM. So we kind of shut Courageous Lake down, focused on KSM. But with the gold price doing what it's done, and also the Canadian dollar weakening, and also more work we did at Courageous Lake, we did an updated pre-feas at Courageous Lake earlier this year that came out with a project that had an initial mine life of 13 years, averaging over 200,000 ounces of gold production a year at an all-in cost of production of about $1,000 an ounce. But then as you go deeper with the pit, you can add another 16 years of mine life on top of that, still maintaining 200,000 ounces of gold production a year. This is a project that's large, that's in a safe jurisdiction, that is ready to be handed over perhaps in a joint venture in a sale process. We are now looking at what is the best way to unlock value to our shareholders for Courageous Lake, which could be a sale, a joint venture, or some other transaction. But it's an asset, quite honestly, that we're probably getting very little value in our portfolio today. But when you look at it on its own, you talk about projects that could be company starters or company makers.
Sure.
Courageous Lake could be one of those.
No question. No question. Before we get to the last one, folks, I just want to remind you, we're going through this update on the different projects quickly. I gave you an overview at the beginning, but a reminder real quick, make sure you spend some time at Seabridge's own website, follow them on social media, get kick the tires a little, you'll learn a lot more. I don't know anybody else off the top of my head that updates the corporate presentation on the website every single month to make sure it's up to date, but you guys pretty much do that.
Well, things change, so you need to
Yeah,
update it, especially in the market. We do a lot of stuff in terms of looking at our ounces per share, our pounds of
right.
copper per share, how we react in the market relative to movements in the gold price and the copper price. So you have to update it every month. And also there's news flow pretty much every month that needs to be
Right.
updated.
Right. So make sure you avail yourself of that, folks, and of course keep up with yours truly because when there's something going on, I try and get updates on everybody out as well. Last but not least was we want to move on to Snowstorm in Nevada, the one US project that you have. You guys, when you picked up that project, you already had people on your team with experience in the state of Nevada. This was an interesting location near the intersection of some major gold trends. The part of the story I always liked because I always want to give you kudos where it's deserved, is that you actually ended up picking up Snowstorm back when from a group of people led by John Paulson, who now may be in the running as the America's next Treasury Secretary. We'll see what happens when that's announced. But John Paulson famously has been a critic of the gold industry. He has been a big gold bug himself. He always wears that on his sleeve, but he was a critic of the industry for blowing money faster than they were building gold, the opposite of what you've done and have a track record as doing. And because of that, when he decided that he's got this nice prospective property in Snowstorm, but he's not a gold miner or explorer, doesn't want to be, he wants to put it in capable hands, he put it in yours. So
He sure did. Yeah. And he's been a big supporter since then. As a matter of fact, when we did our financing a couple of years ago to buy our next door neighbor's Pretium from project from Pretium, he was the lead participant in that financing. So he's upped his percentage in the company over time as well.
and that speaks well when you've got that kind of support from a very successful billionaire money manager and a guy who's a gold bug and who correctly for a lot of years pointed out how too many gold companies, producers and explorers alike, have again they've destroyed capital. It's a it's unfortunately a thing that's endemic. Things have gotten better somewhat in the recent past, but it's good that he still trusts you. So I know Snowstorm, with everything else going on, has not been a big priority, but it's something that's got a lot of potential. Is there anything you can offer as to what your next steps there might be?
Yeah, we've gone very slow walk on that one, Chris, to be honest. It's expensive drilling, it's complicated
Yeah.
drilling. We have a tertiary cover of several hundred meters we need to get through before we get to the zones of interest. In Canada, for our Canadian assets for exploration, we can use flow-through financings, which allows us to raise dollars at a 30, 40, 50% premium to market. You can't do that for a project in Nevada. So if we go hard at Snowstorm, it'll be equity dilution to our shareholders unless we sell other assets to fund it. And we just want to make sure that if we have to go back to the market to fund Snowstorm, that it's at a much higher share price than we're sitting at today. And I think the best way to get that higher share price is getting a transaction done on KSM that I think will lift our valuation quite quickly and quite high.
Well, I agree, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't want to end this update without going into this. A lot of people have heard of what's called the Lassonde curve. And there are basically two major points in the growth of a company from initial exploration to eventual development or sale of an asset. The first big move, on average, with a share price comes with a major discovery, but the second one does come when development becomes a certainty. And
Right.
you've got a good asset. And so, I've used the example a lot of times and some stuff I've got coming up. I'm going to use Seabridge's chart over time as a specific example of how, as well as you've done over time, it's still interesting to look at how the culture of investing has changed so much and people don't pay as much attention to this, gold mining space and even commodities more broadly, though that's starting to change. That you look over time, and I remember when the gold price peaked at over $1,900 an ounce in 2011, Seabridge shares were around $40.
Yeah, high 30s for sure.
High
Yeah.
30s. And now with a gold price half again higher than it was back then, granted costs have gone up as well, but you got a gold price half again higher, there should be similar interest, and your share price is roughly half of that.
Yeah.
And at the same
And,
time,
and
KSM has become an infinitely greater asset.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we're not the only one. Even
No,
look at Newmont. I mean, Newmont was probably in the mid 80s at that point in time. They're
yeah,
half the price again here now.
exactly.
So it's the entire sector here.
Yeah,
I've been in the business now for over 40 years. Never in my career have I seen a bigger disconnect
that's right.
between the valuation of gold mining equities relative to the gold price.
Mhm.
Gold mining stocks are trading at half to a third of where they should be trading, with gold at $2,700 an ounce.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. And I didn't mean to single you out in any negative sense, certainly, but in fact, you've done better than a lot of them, as you pointed out. But it's the point being is that, as you just said, when you get that development thing under your belt, there's a partner that comes in. I do agree that there's going to be re-rating, and then you'll have a lot more valuable equity to be able to do things like that if you choose to. But let's segue, from there, Rudi, into taken at face value, if you look at all of the things now with the existing $36 trillion debt, $2+ trillion annual deficits during times of a good economy and booming stock market. What the hell is it going to be if we have a recession? Okay. And all the rest of it, and all the promises of President-elect Trump to cut taxes further. We're going to do this, we're going to do this and do that. And if you take everything at face value, instead of MAGA hats, we're shortly going to be breaking out the MGGA hats, make gold great again. Because if you look at the policies on the surface, we're looking, when you look at Trump's mercantilist objectives, and folks, you need to look up that term, mercantilism. That's what we're going to be having. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily, but you look at that, you look at Trump's stated desire for a cheaper dollar. All of this stuff together, and more and more and more debt and deficits, only makes gold go one way, and it ain't down, is it?
No, it's not. We published quite a bit about the gold market. I know Jim Anthony and I did a recent webinar with Red Cloud where he kind of gave a 15-minute presentation on we call it the tale of two gold markets, the East versus the West. Right now, you have the East buying as much gold as they can, irregardless of price, because they are focused on fiscal policy.
Yeah.
Whereas in the West, they're still driven by monetary policy, thinking that the Fed's going to get it right and no worries to have out there. I mean, then you have BRICS on top of that. We have these huge deficits in the U.S. that need to be funded. Historically, they have been funded by the East coming in and buying our debt. Well, guess what? They're no longer buying it. In fact, they're selling it, and they're actually turning those cash proceeds, those US dollar proceeds, into gold.
Yeah.
And that's why you have gold at all-time highs. Unfortunately, the East doesn't buy mining stocks.
It's
That's where the West has to come in. So
right.
until the Western investor comes back to the table here, gold stocks may continue to flounder relative to the gold price. But rest assured that at some point in time, FOMO will kick in, the Western investor will come back, and we're going to see gold equities up two, three times where they're trading at today in a very short period of time.
I agree. And let me underscore what one of the things you just said, Rudi. It was only about, and you may know this specifically, so don't hesitate jumping in. It was only about mid-year or so this past year that in North America you actually started to see net inflows into the gold ETFs,
Yep.
because when generalist investors come into gold, they don't even buy Seabridge as a first matter, let alone, the smaller 10, 20, $50 million market cap exploration companies. They'll buy a GLD because they want the exposure to gold. They don't want to think about it.
Right.
Okay, maybe I should get some mining stocks too. They buy GDX, they buy GDXJ, etc. And it was only about the middle of this year. And the reason being is that there's still too many play toys that
Yep.
investors have that don't have anything to do with gold. And it's my view, unless the president-elect is willing to do something totally dramatic to change the banking equation and the debt equation, and there are things that he could do. I question whether it'll happen. That's a story for another day. But the great stagflation is only going to worsen, which means that eventually the markets are going to have to reckon with chronically high inflation, that if Trump has his way policy wise will go higher, not lower, as he's promised, as I see it. Long-term interest rates will stay up. And one of these days, if that continues, and a lot of smart people have said this recently, Paul Tudor Jones, Stan Druckenmiller, for the first time in a dozen years, Berkshire Hathaway has more cash than it has stocks in its
Yep.
portfolio, because they see this coming.
Right.
All right. That all of a sudden, when we have chronically high inflation and interest rates that nobody has on their bingo card, they all think we're going down to nothing. The Fed's going to keep cutting rates, blah, blah, blah. Okay. when long-term rates are higher in a year than they are now, when inflation is 4 or 5% again and won't go down, now how do your 80 PE stocks look? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And that's going to be the kind of thing that's going to change people in a bigger way back into hard assets. And again, without some truly revolutionary policy changes to change that equation, that's our fate. It's math.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And that's why I have 95% of my net worth in Seabridge common shares.
Yeah,
We have the best exposure to gold. Historically, we've
right.
proven that over 25 years. If gold's going higher, our shares should do what they've done in the past, and it's outperform gold and other gold equities.
Yeah,
So I sleep well at night, Chris, and knowing what I
I'm sure you
know
do.
and having the faith that gold is going to go to levels that'll shock people.
Yeah. Well, look, folks, on this video recording, if you look in the notes and stuff, I'll have that link to that Red Cloud presentation that you just said, so people can get a little bit more of your big picture views, you and Jim, on the gold space. But for now, hey, great job as always. I'm looking forward to the next developments to come. And folks, once more, make sure that you visit Seabridge's website, keep up with them on social media, get their updates, make sure you follow me. A lot of stuff coming out in the near term where I'm going to have a lot of sector specific information that we're updating imminently now that the election is over. We know how the dust is settled. And look, things weren't going to change for gold, whether Harris got in or Trump got in, or for those of you old enough to remember, Pat Paulson got in. The math is still going to undergird not just gold, but I think all the commodities, and especially now that you're just as big a copper story, Rudi, I think you got two kicks at the can for what is going to continue to be an unfolding secular bull market for commodities. So again, congratulations on 25 years, and blessings for, if we're all lucky, 25 more.
I hope not.
Well,
I might be dead by then.
yeah.
But Chris, always appreciate the chance to catch up with you, and look forward to our next update.
Absolutely. We'll need to do them more often. You take care.
Okay, take care.
All right.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.